RT's sister channel in the United Kingdom's premiered on air, broadcasting live from the heart of London.
3, 2, 1, and cue Bill Aynett.
It's 6 o'clock, live from central London. This is RT UK.
Well, RT UK will be available to 90% of households, initially for 5 hours a day. In the future, it's got ambitious plans to become the third most watched news channel in the UK. RT's Polly Boyker next reports on how the launch was received in Britain then.
UK made its official entrance on the UK news scene last night. The channel is now up and running from our Westminster studios here, and it does aim to bring an alternative perspective on current affairs in Britain, as well as present underreported stories. But not everybody was thrilled about the channel's appearance. As you can see, some of the headlines in both the British and the international press were really rather cutting headlines about RT. Some even called for a boycott of what they called Russian propaganda. And over in the Twitter sphere, there was a bit of a Twitter storm when one Westminster campaigner called for his fellow political activists not to appear in interviews on RT. Now, that caused some healthy debate about the media over on Twitter. Some people sprang to RT's defense, but it's not the first controversy to hit the young channel. In the run-up to RT UK's launch, there was an advertising campaign planned running up to the launch, and it featured world leaders, and it sort of provoked people to question what happens if you don't question the mainstream narrative and what the consequences of that could be. But major outdoor advertisers here in the UK refused to put that advertising up in London, and they cited political undertones as the reason for it. So RT was forced to come up with an alternative poster.
And indeed we did. Let's talk to journalist and broadcaster Neil Clark. He's in the UK for us. Oxford there, I think, today. Perfect receiving patch for our new channel then, that's broadcasting 5-6 hours a night. I mean, some would argue, wouldn't they, that the more variety you've got within broadcasting, the more news channels there are, the better. Why is there this criticism then coming forward?
Oh, absolutely, Kevin. I mean, if you're a real Democrat, if you believe in freedom of speech, you welcome the more channels, the better, really. And that's what I do. I want to see RT, the UK channel. I want to see the BBC. I want to see Al Jazeera. I want to see all the channels. And I think that anybody who has an open mind, who wants to find out what's going on in the world today, would welcome the launch of RT. But the trouble is, we're living at the moment in this sort of period, which I've called the new McCarthyism. We've got a group of new McCarthyites who are trying to clamp down on dissident voices, particularly dissident voices on foreign policy. And it's interesting that if we look at the attacks on RT and see who's making them, we see a strong neoconservative, if you like, the pro-war lobby are at the forefront of this campaign against RT, because the great crime of RT is, of course, it challenges the dominant narrative particularly on foreign policy. And it makes it much harder for the Endless War Brigade to sell their illegal wars. We think back to 2003 in the Iraq War. And I remember watching the coverage on the mainstream channels back then, Kevin, and it was pretty appalling. We used to have neocon after neocon being wheeled out to tell us about Saddam's weapons of mass destruction. It was a huge propaganda campaign. Now we've got channels like RT that can challenge that, and I think that's why the neocons and the liberal so-called left interventionists are so angry, because they haven't got control of the narrative as they had back 10, 12 years ago.
Of course, the criticism is far from universal. Indeed, RT's been nominated for many prestigious awards, including some Emmys. Why is that being ignored?
Well, absolutely. I think viewers are voting with their remote control buttons, aren't they? More and more people are watching RT. And this is the point, Kevin, that if you look at the neocon critiques is that RT is just a crude propaganda channel. It's full of crank voices, of lunatics and idiots. Well, if that was true, why are more and more people watching it? Yeah, the fact is that RT puts on a very wide range of opinion, which you don't get, unfortunately, still on many of the other channels.
Well, Margarita Simonyan, the editor-in-chief, said she wants this channel to be third most popular news channel, I guess. She's talking about behind BBC News, Sky News, either or. They're the big channels there. Is that going to happen, or is it wishful thinking?
I think it is, because I think it's part of the zeitgeist, Kevin. I think that people are sick and tired of being told by pompous establishment figures what channels they should watch and what channels they shouldn't watch. Some of these articles that we've seen today in the last 24 hours, absolutely outrageous, by very pompous commentators saying, look, you shouldn't really be watching RT, you should only be watching channels that we approve of. And I think the zeitgeist now is that people are sick of this. We've got the internet, we've got digital TV, we've got a lot of channels, and people are no longer going to be lectured to by people who regard themselves as very superior people as to what channels. So I think to answer your question, yes, RT figures will continue to rise, and that's why it's being attacked. Because if people weren't watching it, we wouldn't get all these attacks.
We've got a great team there, and Bill Dodd, of course, heading it up every night. He's transferred over from Moscow over to London. Our best to you over there, and thank you for your thoughts as well in the UK. Much appreciated. Neil Clark,
Thanks, Kevin. All the
journalist
best.
and broadcaster.